The alien warship hung over the burning colony like a predator savoring the last pulse of its prey. Beneath it, the horizon glowed red where human settlements once stood, flames licking at the skeletal remains of cities that had fought, failed, and finally fallen silent. From the observation deck, Overlord Kothrex regarded the devastation with something close to boredom. His crimson eyes tracked the alien champion striding through the ruins, a towering, cybernetic figure whose blade sang as it severed the last pockets of resistance. The humans here had fought bitterly, with crude weapons and desperate courage, but in the end, they had been only that, desperate. Kothrex turned to one of his officers, a thin, anxious creature named Vrolek. "Another world pacified," Kothrex said, voice like gravel under steel. "What number is this?" The officer hesitated, his spined crest flicking nervously. 127, my lord. By cycle count. Kothrex made a faint sound of disinterest. The first worlds had offered challenge, perhaps even pride and conquest. Now, they fell like wheat before the scythe. The humans barely begged anymore. Some didn't speak at all, dying with eyes that burned rather than pleaded. He had begun to suspect they were too ignorant to recognize inevitability. Do they truly think silence unnerves us? Kothrex mused, watching the champion drag the severed standard of the human militia through the ash, a species of ghosts haunting their own extinction. A junior officer muttered, perhaps too softly, "It is strange, my lord. Every colony fights alone. No attempts to unite, no messages for peace or surrender. As though they wait for something unseen." Kothrex's mandibles twitched in irritation. They wait for death, nothing more. The champion struck down the last defender, a soldier who, despite broken armor and blood streaming into his eyes, had swung until the final breath rattled free. The alien warband roared in triumph. Kothrex did not. Victory was meaningless when it came so easily. Reports flowed in, resistance broken, population neutralized, spoils ready for transport. The council on the homeworld would be pleased, though Kothrex no longer cared for their empty commendations. The humans had been useful as a test for the Empire's expanding fleets, but the test was long over. Their empire spread like wildfire across the stars, unchallenged, unquestioned. Until the order came. It arrived as Kothrex's fleet hung in orbit, sifting through the ashes below. A high-priority transmission from the Imperial Council, sealed with the crest of the Supreme Chamber itself. He read it once, slowly, as though his eyes had deceived him. The Council demanded the immediate conquest of the human homeworld, Earth itself. Kothrex felt the faintest stir of anticipation. So, the human's cradle still lived. He had half believed it myth after so many isolated colonies burned without reinforcements arriving from any core. But here it was, the source. Perhaps they would finally scream when the knife hovered over their true heart. "Prepare the fleets," Kothrex ordered. The officers stirred, some with hesitation. One cleared his throat. "The homeworld, my lord? Intelligence reports no military presence of note. It may not be worth the resources to." Kothrex silenced him with a glance sharp enough to cut. "The council commands. We obey. Besides, what symbol burns brighter than the enemy's birthplace?" The fleets moved with mechanical precision, 1,000 ships tearing through the dark toward a pale blue world orbiting an unremarkable sun. What they found puzzled them. No defenses rose to meet them. No transmissions came begging for mercy or threatening retaliation. Earth sat quiet, its cities glimmering like jewels against the night. It looked undefended. Kothrex felt contempt coil through him. So this was humanity's heart? This fragile sphere, all oceans and weathered continents? It would fall in a single day. Perhaps less. "Deploy the champion," he ordered. "Let their people watch their guardian fall before the first blow lands." The champion descended through cloud and smoke, landing amid a crowd of stunned onlookers near one of the vast human cities. Cameras hovered, broadcasting his towering form across continents. His blade hummed with contained violence as he advanced on the lone figure stepping from the human ranks to meet him. A soldier. unarmed, calm in a way that unsettled even Kothrex as he watched from orbit. The champion raised his weapon high, a killing stroke perfected across 100 battlefields. The cameras caught everything, the blur of motion, the hiss of descending death. And the soldier caught the strike with 2 fingers. The blade stopped as though frozen in stone. The soldier did not flinch. Kothrex leaned forward, heart kicking once against his ribs. The champion snarled and pressed harder. The soldier's hand did not move. With the same calm, unhurried motion, he pushed the weapon aside like a parent removing a toy from a child's hand. Through the live feed, Kothrex saw the soldier speak, voice low but carrying across the stunned silence. "You shouldn't have come here." The words slid like ice into Kothrex's chest. Around him, officers shifted uneasily, spines rigid with a tension none had felt before. On the streets below, the champion took a step back. It was then Kothrex realized something strange. Earth still had not fired a single shot. No missiles rose from its cities. No warships launched from hidden bays. Nothing moved except that one soldier, standing so calmly as the alien war machine surrounded his world. The unease spread like a ripple through Kothrex's command deck. Officers whispered about traps, about human cunning, about the silence that now felt less like fear and more like waiting. Kothrex crushed the thought before it could root in his own mind. It was one soldier. A trick of local gravity fields, perhaps. Some cybernetic enhancement. There was no reason. But the words replayed in his head, cold and certain. "You shouldn't have come here." For the first time in his long career, Overlord Kothrex wondered if his empire had made a mistake. The moment the champion strike was caught on Earth's soil, the alien empire lost its rhythm. Kothrex stood rigid on the command deck, watching the replay in silence as it flashed across a dozen holoscreens. Officers murmured, unsettled, but none dared meet his gaze. Across the empire, the image spread like wildfire. The human soldier, calm as night, holding death itself between 2 fingers. No one knew his name. He gave none. He didn't raise his voice, didn't demand surrender, didn't posture for the cameras. He just ended the fight before it began, then stood there as though he were the one weighing judgment. Kothrex hated the unease creeping through him. He had seen countless warriors die screaming on 100 worlds, but this man acted like none of this surprised him. Like he had been waiting. When the alien fleets advanced on Earth's orbit, defenses finally stirred, but not in the way Kothrex expected. No blaring threats or panic-stricken broadcasts came from the planet below. Instead, a cold, clinical voice spoke across every alien frequency. "This is Admiral Elena Rourke of the Terran Defense Network. You've come far enough." Kothrex felt his spines lift slightly at the tone. There was no bluster, no plea for diplomacy, only finality. Before he could respond, Earth's true face revealed itself. Shadows peeled away from low orbit, and Kothrex realized too late they were ships. Hundreds, then thousands, their hulls black and silent, long kept hidden among orbital junk and abandoned stations. Human warcraft surged outward in perfect formations, engines humming like a single colossal machine waking from slumber. His officers shouted warnings as alien cruisers moved to intercept. Beams of energy slashed across the void. Kothrex expected a struggle, some desperate clash before his superior numbers crushed resistance as always. Instead, the alien fleet began dying in silence. Human weapons struck with surgical precision, cutting drives from carriers, blinding command ships, gutting weapons arrays without wasting a single shot on civilian transports or fleeing shuttles. It was not rage guiding them. It was mathematics. Kothrex gripped the rail as one of his flagships bloomed into a silent sphere of fire. His stomach twisted, not at the loss, but at the speed. His ships had no time to even retreat before wormhole signatures flickered at the edges of the system. More human fleets poured through as though the laws of distance and fuel meant nothing to them. "Impossible," muttered Vrolek, eyes wide. They can't have built this in secret. We would have seen the supply lines, They wanted us to see nothing." Kothrex snapped, though his own voice lacked conviction. The calm voice returned on open channels. Outer colonies were decoys. You burned them because we allowed it. For years, you've been feeding your fleets into our traps, one world at a time. A faint pause. And you thought we were the prey. Kothrex turned slowly toward the transmission feed as Admiral Rourke's face appeared, a human woman with eyes like carved stone. No hatred, no triumph. Just certainty. You invaded expecting fear, she continued. All you found was patience. The words sank like hooks into Kothrex's mind. He wanted to deny them, but the battle outside left no room for comfort. His ships were breaking apart faster than he could command reinforcements, and the humans, they didn't even sound angry. Reports from the Council homeworld crackled across his secondary feeds, panic swelling in voices that had mocked humanity hours ago. Some demanded full retaliation, others stammered about negotiating terms, but no one offered solutions. Kothrex silenced the channel, jaw tightening. The Council had drunk deep from victory for too long to taste anything else. They would never understand what was happening until it was too late. He turned instead to the tactical displays. The humans moved with eerie unity, fleets dividing and reforming like flowing water, always cutting where his lines were weakest, always vanishing before he could counterstrike. He had studied countless wars, countless foes. None fought like this. A thought gnawed at him as the battle worsened. This could not have been built overnight. The human colonies had burned, yes, but never once had they begged for rescue. Never once had they rallied in defense of each other. He had assumed it was weakness. Now he wondered if they had been smiling through broken teeth, knowing every defeat drew the Empire deeper into the noose. One by one, alien cruisers vanished from the board. Not destroyed, disabled, boarded, stripped of command. The humans didn't slaughter when they didn't have to. They moved with a restraint Kothrex found more terrifying than ruthlessness. Why hold back? Vralek whispered, voicing what others wouldn't. Why not finish us outright? Kothrex didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Hours later, with the remnants of his once mighty fleet limping toward the nearest jump point, Kothrex locked himself in his private chamber. He called up fragments of intercepted data, human history, battles, records from the last century of Earth's blood-soaked evolution. He watched grainy footage of 2 world wars fought before humanity left its own atmosphere. Cities burning under nuclear fire. Soldiers clawing through mud and poison gas with nothing but rifles and desperation. Entire generations consumed by conflict, yet somehow growing sharper, stronger with each wound. The humans had turned war into a mirror, staring at their own capacity for destruction until they no longer flinched at its reflection. Kothrex felt a coldness creep through his chest as he realized the Empire had never faced a species that had practiced on itself first. Behind him, the Council demanded reports, reinforcements, answers. He ignored them. He thought instead of a soldier on Earth who stopped death with 2 fingers and spoke like a man already certain of the ending. For the first time since his youth, Kothrex felt something stir beneath his armor. Not anger, not hatred, fear. The Council finally broke its silence, not with unity, but with fury and denial. Kothrex stood before the holographic chamber as voices overlapped in static-filled chaos. Some counselors demanded retaliation, others shrieked for diplomacy, and a few muttered about abandoning entire sectors to save the Empire's core. They've caught us off guard, nothing more, one counselor snarled, his image flickering. Their fleets are clever, yes, but limited. We crush them now, before this illusion spreads. Kothrex stared at the speaker, at the soft, perfumed face of a man who had never set foot on a battlefield. Illusion. His voice carried through the chamber like a blade scraping stone. They dismantled 3 of our fleets before we understood we were even at war. You think this is theater? They are primitives, another counselor snapped, pounding his fist. Scraps of savagery holding stolen weapons. Kothrex considered the human footage again, trenches, firestorms, entire continents drowning in blood, and wondered who here truly understood savagery. They are not primitives, he said finally. They are predators who learned patience. The chamber erupted again. Cowards called for retreat, fools called for conquest. Kothrex listened to none of them. He was watching the maps, watching the reports of human fleets appearing where no fleets should be, of shipyards destroyed before their locations were ever public, of wormhole strikes cutting supply lines that should have been secret. It was as though the humans could read the Empire's pulse and stop its heart one vein at a time. And through it all, Earth remained silent. The Council voted, if it could be called that, and chose pride over caution. They would gather the Empire's remaining strength into one armada, a single hammer to crush the human core before the infection of fear spread further. Kothrex gave no speech. He merely obeyed, though the cold weight in his chest told him the hammer would fall on nothing but air. The fleets assembled above the Empire's capital world, hundreds of warships bristling with weapons, the largest force since the Empire's birth. Kothrex commanded the vanguard, though he noticed some ships launch late, some crews hesitant. Discipline frayed when fear entered the bloodstream. They reached Earth in less than a cycle. No resistance met them. The planet turned below, quiet, blue, unarmed, or pretending to be. Where are they? Vralek muttered beside him. Kothrex had no answer. His claws tapped the railing as the armada descended, scanning for human fleets, for hidden guns, for any sign of the traps that had gutted them before. The first wormhole opened above them. Human ships poured through like a flood. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Kothrex stared in silence as the Terran fleets moved with inhuman precision, dividing the Empire's armada into isolated clusters before anyone could form defensive lines. Communication arrays died first, engines next, then weapons. Human tactics left no room for courage or chaos, only paralysis. The Empire's proudest battleships drifted powerless in less than an hour. Kothrex tried to rally what forces he could, but the humans never fought where he needed them to. They vanished through wormholes before counterstrikes landed, reappearing where his fleets were weakest. Each maneuver was a lesson in humiliation. On the surface below, reports screamed of human soldiers landing in capital cities, disabling planetary defenses with speed that defied belief. Entire garrisons surrendered without firing. Then came the broadcast. The same soldier appeared again, the one who had caught the champion's blade. His image filled every screen across the Empire. He stood in the alien capital itself now, unarmed, surrounded by soldiers who did not dare approach him. Kothrex's breath tightened as he watched. The alien champion attacked again, roaring his fury before the Empire's people. The soldier caught the strike the same way he had on Earth, with 2 fingers, the blade frozen, as though the universe itself obeyed his will. Then, slowly, he snapped the weapon in half. No words, no threats, just the calm certainty of a man who knew fear when others finally felt it. Kothrex realized then the war was over. Not because the fleets were burning, not because the armies were surrendering, but because the Empire itself had seen this and understood, as he did, that nothing they threw at these humans would ever be enough. The Council called for retreat, for negotiation, for anything that would stop the collapse spreading through their worlds like rot through timber. Kothrex didn't bother responding. He was watching the soldier walk through his capital as though it already belonged to him. The Empire had ruled for centuries through terror, through conquest, through the weight of inevitability. Now its people looked at this quiet, efficient destruction and learned what inevitability truly felt like. Kothrex stood alone on the bridge as his flagship drifted powerless above the burning capital. Around him, officers whispered surrender. Others prayed. He watched the human fleets moving in perfect silence, blotting out the stars, and thought of the counselors who had called them primitives. Primitives did not fight like this. Predators did. The war that had begun with arrogance was ending with understanding, and Kothrex hated how much sense it all made. The Empire had thought fear was a weapon. It had never considered fear could be a mirror. Kothrex walked through the ruins of the capital in silence, his boots crunching over shattered stone and scorched banners. Smoke drifted through the avenues where alien statues had once stood like gods over lesser creatures. Now they lay toppled, faces cracked, weapons broken, as though mocking the Empire's belief in permanence. The human fleets hovered above the world like patient predators that had already eaten their fill. They had stopped firing hours ago. Whole regiments of alien soldiers had laid down arms without waiting for orders, surrendering to the silent, surgical enemy who struck without rage, without mercy, and without waste. Kothrex had expected occupation forces to pour through the streets, loud and arrogant as conquerors tended to be. Instead, they came quietly. Human soldiers moved with precision, restoring power grids, evacuating the wounded, ignoring the riches of palaces and storehouses. It was conquest without plunder, war fought as though every step had already been decided long before the first shot was fired. At the steps of the council chamber, where voices had once roared with pride and power, Kothrex found Admiral Elena Rourke waiting. She stood with her helmet under one arm, uniform scorched but whole, her expression unreadable. "Overlord Kothrex," she said, her tone the same as it had been during the transmissions, calm, final, offering nothing. "Your council is gone. Those who lived surrendered hours ago." Kothrex studied her, this woman who spoke like a judge passing sentences already written. "And now," he asked, voice low, "do you burn the Empire as we burned your colonies?" Rourke shook her head. "We didn't fight you to become you." The words struck harder than any weapon. Kothrex had expected vengeance, perhaps even respected it. But this restraint unsettled him. Conquerors who wanted nothing were the hardest to understand. "You'll govern your own people," Rourke continued. "Under oversight. There will be trials for war crimes. Disarmament protocols. Human representatives will ensure stability until a unified coalition forms." Kothrex almost laughed, though the sound died in his throat. "You destroy our fleets, break our armies, take our capital, and then hand it back with rules attached? Mercy after humiliation." Rourke's eyes narrowed faintly. "Mercy isn't weakness. You learned that too late." Kothrex looked past her at the shattered skyline where his empire's pride had once stood untouchable. It wasn't the ruins that hollowed him. It was the knowledge that the war had been lost before he even understood it had begun. "You planned this for years," he said slowly. "It wasn't a question." "Since your first attack on our colonies," Rourke confirmed, "we hid our fleets. Let you believe we were fractured. Every loss bought us time. Every raid you launched made you overconfident. By the time you reached Earth, we were ready to end it." Kothrex remembered the silence of those dying colonies, the way no one had begged, the way soldiers had fought without hope of rescue, yet without fear. He had mistaken it for weakness. Now he saw it for what it was, bait set with blood and fire. "What happens to us?" he asked, though he suspected the answer. "You adapt," Rourke said simply, "or you vanish. We won't chase your people across the stars, but the age of conquest is over. For everyone." Behind her, human soldiers escorted surviving counselors from the chamber. Some shouted about treaties, others about rights and sovereignty. Rourke didn't look at them once. Kothrex realized then this woman had never fought for glory, or territory, or even revenge. Humanity hadn't risen from desperation to conquer the galaxy. They had done it because someone had to end the cycle before it devoured everything. He wondered if the Council had ever truly understood who they had provoked. By nightfall, the Empire's banners were lowered across 100 worlds. Human fleets didn't linger. They dismantled weapons, destroyed shipyards, left supply chains intact for civilians to rebuild. It was the opposite of empire. Control without occupation, power without chains. Kothrex attended the surrender ceremony because there was nothing else left to do. The surviving counselors signed treaties with trembling hands. Rourke signed with steady ones. No anthems played. No victory speeches echoed. Humanity took no pride in what it had done, and somehow that made the defeat feel heavier. When it was over, Kothrex approached Rourke one last time. "Why spare us?" he asked. "Why not erase the Empire, so it can never threaten you again?" Rourke studied him for a long moment before answering. "Because we know what rises from ashes. We've burned ourselves before. Entire continents once vanished under our own wars. If we kill you all, someone worse will fill the void. Kothrex thought of the human soldier who had stopped the champion's strike with 2 fingers, who had walked through the capital like a man fulfilling prophecy. A weapon like that in the hands of a species without restraint would have ended far more than an empire. He nodded slowly, the weight of understanding settling like stone. You fear what you might become. Rourke didn't deny it. Power changes species. We won't let it change us the way it changed you. In the days that followed, Kothrex became something he had never imagined, a liaison between his shattered empire and the new coalition forming under human guidance. Some called him a traitor, others a survivor. He called himself neither. Survival had lost its meaning when the galaxy itself had shifted under his feet. He watched human engineers rebuild power grids his fleets had destroyed, watched their soldiers distribute food where his armies had starved civilians into obedience. They governed like people carrying memories of famine and fire in their bones, as though victory itself meant nothing next to preventing the next war. And slowly, the Empire stopped resisting. Not from fear, though fear had begun it, but because humanity offered something no conqueror ever had before, an end. On the final day before the human fleets withdrew beyond the capital skies, Kothrex climbed the highest tower left standing. Rourke joined him, silent for a long time as they watched the sun bleed across the horizon. Will it last? He asked finally. Rourke didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the departing fleets. That depends on you, she said at last. We'll leave governors, diplomats, observers. But this is your world. Your people will decide whether they want peace more than pride. Kothrex almost told her pride was all they had left. But as he watched children run through streets once lined with soldiers, he realized it wasn't true anymore. When the last human ship rose through the clouds, Kothrex stood among his people as they watched in silence. Not hatred, not fear. Something else. Understanding. Humanity had not come to rule them. They had come to end the age of rulers altogether. As the stars swallowed the departing fleets, Kothrex felt the weight of centuries shifting. The Empire was gone. The galaxy itself was changing. And for the first time since the war began, he wondered not what humanity would do next, but what they would awaken.